And we are live. This is Jersey Hobby Hour, episode 7 for October 7th, 2015. I'm Steve Chin, joined by Alan Wan.
Hey guys, it looks like I just got out of work.
And also a special guest today, Justin Kazlukas.
Hi everybody. Kozlowskis, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, Kazlowskis.
I should have mentioned that.
You got one job,
I
Steve.
apologize.
Just say Kaz. Just say Kaz. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what everyone does.
One job.
That's right.
Jersey Hobby Hour is a show where I have some discussions with friends about current events in gaming, entertainment, tech, or anything else that really catches our fancy. And we just like to have conversations on the internet. We've been doing this for a few weeks now. We anticipate completing about 12 episodes for a 3-month-long project. So we're a little bit more than halfway through, at which point we'll evaluate and see if we want to continue, which by all considerations it seems like we're doing well enough that we will. At this point, I want to go ahead and get started. We have a good number of topics, which are all listed down below in the description section of the YouTube video, if you're watching this live. This video will also post to YouTube on our channel, Jersey Hobby Hour, about 10 or 15 minutes or so after this live stream is over. So you could check it out even if you've missed something or if you want to come back later and check us out. Please go ahead and do so. For our first topic, it looks like we have some interesting news on the sort of TV front, with Marvel actually introducing some new shows. Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So there are 2 new shows that are coming to ABC. One is called Damage Control, which is based off a comic book, which basically follows this crew of this cleanup crew that are overworked and underpaid, that are in the Marvel universe. So basically, they're the janitors for the Avengers, essentially, where they clean up everything. The description they kind of go through is that they basically deal with all these the unique fallout from superhero conflicts. So they're the ones in charge of returning lost ray guns to the rightful owners. They help reschedule a wedding venue after it's been vaporized, or they track down prize animals. So that's kind of the first show. The second show that they're gonna go through is also basically kind of a spin-off to Agents of the Shield with the Mockingbird and Lance. Basically going to follow those 2, and the show is going to be called Marvel's Most Wanted. And kind of based on what we see in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3 so far, it seems like they're kind of hell-bent on hunting Hydra. So it seems like that might be just a series where they're just going to be hunting down Ward and Hydra. And the third kind of TV show that's coming to Netflix soon, and there's been a couple of teasers that have been coming out, has been AKA Jessica Jones. Which is basically another Netflix series. It's part of the Defender series that Marvel is trying to have over in Netflix, where they have 4 characters. One's Daredevil, one's going to be Jessica Jones, one's going to be Power Man, and the other one's going to be Iron Fist. So to give you kind of my interpretation for each one, for Damage Control, I think that show, because it's going to be a comedy, I think it's going to fit the MCU pretty well, because Marvel movies don't really take themselves that serious. No matter how dark they go into, they always have this comedic element to it that kind of alleviates that tension. And that's why they're not like DC, where everything's dark and brooding and angry and sad. As you can see with Batman vs Superman. What are your takes on Damage Control?
I mean, me personally, Damage Control looks kind of interesting because it is a comedy, but I feel like a lot of Marvel properties in themselves are sort of comedies because they're very kid-friendly. One thing that I really noticed is that this seems kind of similar to a show that I started watching on Geek and Sundry, and I'll bring that up here. I'll show you real quick. It's called Space Janitors, and it's basically about custodians on board the Death Star equivalent, basically. So it's hey, Luke Skywalker's hand gets chopped off on Bespin. Where does that hand go? Who has to clean that hand up? It's that kind of joke and that kind of funniness that they talk about.
The unanswered questions.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the kind of humor that you'd expect, and that's kind of what I expect out of something like this the show Damage Control. A little bit interesting. I'm curious, but I'm apprehensive because they're expanding the universe a little bit too quickly. Justin, what do you think?
It seems interesting. I mean, full disclosure, I'm actually not caught up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. But I like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I think the Marvel Universe is great. Like I think they actually have obviously have a very rich history, a lot of subject material. Maybe a little bit too much, like you were saying. Yeah. But I question that. I don't know if a comedy, like a pure comedy, would be able to like kind of take off. They would have to do something more, like some kind of story, because just the context of that show, it almost sounds like they're going to be following other storylines. Like kind of like a cleanup crew could follow, like they could follow the Avengers, they could follow Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I don't know. I'd have to wait and see. But I wonder if a pure comedy would actually take off. I feel like a lot of times people that watch Marvel kind of like they like the storylines. Like you said, the comedy mixed in, but they like the storylines primarily. So,
no, I'm a little bit interested though because you mentioned follow Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or follow the Avengers. I think a show like this kind of has to follow existing properties in order to make it funny. Like I think it would be a lot funnier if Iron Man does something and then you gotta fix it. I don't know if it's as funny if you have a superhero character that most people aren't acquainted with yet. Do something and then they have to clean up after them. I'm really not sure what kind of humor that could arrive out of it. I mean, is it going to be like a typical like family comedy kind of thing? I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical, but I mean, I'm willing to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be good. We're worried if it was going to fall into like a villain of the week kind of pattern, which a lot of times gets stale and doesn't always last the long run.
Yeah, that seems like that's what's going to ultimately be in actually Marvel's Most Wanted. It seems like that's what they're going to. It seems like that's what they're going to do is basically they're going to be hunting down Hydra members. So it seems like it's going to be like monster of the week, right? It's basically all right. Who do you have to take down this week? I think a lot of these things they're hanging off the Marvel brand, honestly. Because they know that they have that built-in brand recognition, that confidence that we have. Basically. Think about it. They made Guardians of the freaking Galaxy. They had a fucking talking raccoon in a fucking tree. No one even nerds didn't even know what Guardians of the Galaxy was, and they made fucking Guardians of the Galaxy. They made Ant-Man for God's sake.
The only problem with this though is it's one thing to release like large blockbuster movies. It's another to have like very long and involved series either on Netflix or on television. I think expanding the universe like this, especially on the TV front, is going to open up too many doors for people to come on and start to watch, or for like a hardcore fan to even keep up with. So like you're going to have the super duper hardcore who only watch all of the Marvel properties and have no time to watch anything else, or you're going to have the casual person who catches all the movies and then a few of the television shows. Like I feel like with the universe expanding so much, yeah, it's cool that there's a lot of content, but for the average person, I mean, honestly, you're really just not going to capture everyone.
No. It seems like they're more, at the risk of sounding like kind of mean, it almost seems like they're taking the approach of throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. Like, people love comedies. We have so much IP. Let's throw it at the wall. It's funny. We have this character who's also very action-packed. Let's throw it at the wall. And I mean, I don't know me personally, I don't ultimately know who's funding this. I don't know if it's, I mean, obviously there's network backing, but I'm sure Marvel's throwing money at it too. Marvel's owned by Disney now, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Disney has so much money to throw at the wall. They're like Marvel, so much money. Just throw everything we can. It's hot right now. How many Marvel movies are coming out? How many billions of dollars are they making? Marvel's hot right now. If there's any time to cash in on that right now, it's going to be now. I mean, if you wait 20 years, I mean, Marvel still may be very popular in 20 years, but right now all those superhero movies are coming out and they're doing very well. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They're good movies.
Yeah.
But throw it at the wall. See if it sticks. Go for it.
Strike when the iron's hot. They definitely should cash in for this.
Yeah, I just feel like I said, like it's just too large of an expansion in the universe, especially at the bottom base. It's one thing to have movies that go on for a while, like Transformers is in our next topic, but like just this bottom base of like content is just growing and growing. It's like being a fan of The Simpsons, for example. They have like almost 30 seasons of television, and I am a fan of The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons, but I have not seen every episode of The Simpsons, and that's the kind of thing I anticipate with like all these different shows coming out for Marvel properties.
Well, very similarly, like you were saying with Transformers, Marvel's making. I mean, they'll be making Marvel movies well after their time, I guess you could say, if they ever fall off, because they're making so much money. I mean, that kind of thing has so much inertia to it. There's so many people going to see it. It's like, I've already seen Avengers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Avengers 6 comes out. I mean, I'll give it another shot. You know what I mean? There's just so much going for it. Like you're saying with Transformers, kind of the same thing. Like a lot of people like the last couple Transformers movies. I didn't see them, but a lot of people said they weren't that great. But they made $1 billion. I think when I looked up the Transformers the other day for the show, they said that it didn't do so well domestically, but worldwide.
Oh yeah.
I mean, overseas Americans love robots hitting each other, but overseas people love robots just fist fighting.
Especially Asians.
I mean, I didn't say that.
With Pacific Rim. So since we're talking about Transformers, we're gonna transition to our next topic, where so the next couple of Transformer movies have been planned. So during the last couple of months, Paramount kind of saw the outcry of Transformers 4 wasn't doing so, made $1 billion, but the critical response and the fan response wasn't very high. So they kind of had this kind of brain trust. They brought in all these writers, and they try to kind of pan out, what we're going to do with the franchise and stuff like that. And they kind of announced before that they're going to do Transformers 5 with Michael Bay returning, and they're going to do an animated movie, but that's going to take place on Cybertron. And apparently, what the article that we have is one of the writers from the writers' room basically saying that they're planning Transformers movies 6, 7, and 8. So my kind of take on this is with the news of Michael Bay coming back, it seems like with all these writers in a room trying to figure out what to do, Michael Bay basically just walked in, he climbed on top of the table, and he just took down his pants and took a shit. And he's like, "This shit is mine." That's basically it, because ultimately this is what's gonna happen. I mean, I love the first one. I don't know if you guys seen the first one, but I love the first one. And then I really liked the second one, but then 3 and 4, oh my god, I watched them all. They were basically like glorified commercials, essentially. The product placement was ridiculous.
Was 2 the one where Shia LaBeouf went to college?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, they filmed it in Princeton. Yeah. They filmed it in Princeton.
At the risk of being like flamed, I thought that movie was fucking awful.
That's fine. No, a lot of people thought 2 was bad too. A lot of people thought 2, 3, and 4 were
halfway through the movie, like the parents are kind of like side characters. Halfway through the movie, they get high and they're like wandering around, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the movie, they get spit out in the middle of the fight. Like, what the hell?
Oh yeah. The inconsistency of the whole movie. It's a Michael Bay movie. All it is basically, it's just the same old TNA slapping against the car. We need a shot of her ass getting out of that car. Leg humping robots, and then like these big robot testicles. And then in Transformers 4, Megatron's supposed to be this badass. Well, he's Galvatron. He's like, and he acts like a Scooby-Doo villain. He's like, "Oh no, those pesky Autobots, they foiled my plan again." I was like, what the fuck is this shit? But yeah, anyway, what do you guys think? And do you think there's ways to improve this franchise?
Justin, how about you go first?
I honestly don't know. So the weird thing is, well, first I should mention that if Michael Bay took a giant shit on the writers' room table, he definitely like wiped with $100 bills, because dude, people love his movies. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that they're bad movies, but they're not. They don't always do it for me. Transformers 1 was alright. Like I said,
they might not have the most compelling story, but there are explosions.
There's a lot of asses and a lot of explosions. Yep. So I mean that sells. Violence and sex.
For Transformers. It's a kid's property. Why do you have? It's basically he's making like an R-rated movie. It's like there's masturbation.
Well, I mean, the parents take their kids to go see a movie, right? So you gotta have something for the parents. But I mean, ultimately, I don't know what you could do to improve the franchise. I actually really like Pacific Rim, but even if I'm remembering correctly, Pacific Rim kind of had the same problem I have with Transformers, just to a much lesser extent. Is that during the fights, there's just so much camera jerking and movement. I don't know what the hell is going on. They should, what they should do is get the guy from the Bourne movies, because those fight scenes were amazing.
No, even the Bourne movies, they had a lot of like close-in cuts.
Cam.
They had a lot of jump cuts,
but the monkey. It's like, oh god.
Maybe I just like the Bourne movies. Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, I love the Bourne movies too.
It's
Like,
just
like you get the gut shots that are going on, and like the camera's like on that fist, like as.
Yes, they should do that, but with robots. They should do that with robots. That's what I'm saying. No, but I mean, I don't know how they would improve it. Maybe Pacific Rim didn't have as big a problem because it was a little bit slower paced. Like the choreography was a little slower paced in Pacific Rim, but I honestly don't know. Transformers, like, I feel like movies are kind of trending towards more realism, while Transformers, because of its very nature, has to kind of lean into its like sci-fi roots. So I don't know. It'd be difficult for me to tell you, and if I knew, maybe I would go, show up Michael Bay and make an amazing Transformers movie. But I don't know how they could improve it. Maybe make the storylines a little less absurd would definitely be a good start.
Cut out the humans.
I think a decided problem for the franchise is just what Alan said, is the sort of human integration too. Like if you got rid of them, because there's a lot of plot holes that involve humans and robots fighting next to each other. Let's avoid talking about how many times that Shia LaBeouf's character should just be dead.
And he kills Starscream. He kills Starscream, for God's sakes.
But I don't. I have a problem with Paramount's executives talking about 10 years worth of content. I'm sure the Marvel guys at Disney are like, yeah, we're gonna have 20 years of content, and they're lining it up. But, they haven't announced it and actually told people like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Like, we're gonna do the next 3 movies like this.
They kind of, yeah.
They do, but they don't. I mean, are they planned all the way out to 2025?
Aren't they released that big graphic, didn't they, with all the movies?
Yeah, but I mean that's only through 2019.
That's still a lot of years, Steve. That's like 5 or 6 years.
Well, that's within the development lifetime and production lifetime of a movie, though.
2020. I'm sorry.
10 years is not. Am I wrong?
I mean, it's hard. It's impressive for them for any company to be able to plan out that far with movies, because, I mean, Marvel properties. Unlikely, but they could tank next year, and all of a sudden those movies seem uneconomical. But
what I'm saying though is, like, if they had decided that they want to do a movie now, like 4 years is a reasonable production time, right? Because you have to line up everything first of all, like just acquire funding and
2
then.
years.
It feels more like what happened is they have Michael Bay or somebody. They have somebody on contract for Transformers for like 4 movies, and they're slating the production time. That's what I could see that being 10 years. If they say we have Michael Bay on retainer to be a director for the next 3 Transformers, and it's going to take 3 years to make each one, maybe you could say 10 years. I don't know.
What I'm just saying is that, like, 10 years, and just someone coming out and saying like, oh, we have Michael Bay for the next 10 years. That's probably just a contract for him to be the guy who runs it. Like, it's not necessarily, hey, let's go ahead and make these. We already have the money and the production like set aside for it. I don't. Nah. I don't know.
It's just a cash cow. They're gonna ride it. They're gonna ride this cash cow. Because think of how bad the response to the 4th one was terrible, and it made $1 billion. Imagine if it was a good movie. Imagine if it was a good movie.
If they're pumping out movies, no matter how crap they are, if they're making $1 billion, they're gonna keep making them. Because at the end of the day, like, movie companies, for the most part, don't care about bastardizing the source material, or they don't really give a crap about anything about the movie. All they care about is how much money did we make versus how much money did we spend. Like. Yep. Bottom line, and if you make,
I think it's a problem because Paramount has very few properties to ride on right now, and one of them is just Transformers. I mean, the only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head is Star Trek.
Yeah.
Has Paramount fallen that far? I feel like I see that Paramount logo in front of all these movies. Maybe I'm thinking of old movies.
Probably old. I don't even know what's another Paramount movie. What is
Well, I'm talking about like properties that are going to.
Yeah, you mean like movies. What they own? What they own? Yeah, they might be like they produce movies. I don't know what properties they own. You know, what property they don't own though. Bad Boys 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about.
They're having the same problem that Sony's having too, right? So I mean, Sony doesn't have a whole lot of properties that they can rely on and to produce regularly. I mean,
Sony's got so many problems.
But I think their contracts are ending on Bond rather soon too. But there's really not too many like properties that they have.
Well, Sony's got problems across the board. I mean, again, not to shit on one company, but like Sony as a company, just I don't know how they were internally structured, but they just had a couple years ago. They just
I'm
had
sure
that
you could
split.
find out with the email hack and all that funny business.
Yeah,
But no,
exactly.
they just
And
had that.
That's Sony Pictures, though.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like weren't they for a while under the same umbrella, and then they got split off? Because like I know like a lot of their divisions were in trouble. I think the only one that was turning a profit was PlayStation.
Yeah, I think that is the only one.
Like of the entire company, the only one that was actually generating any profit was PlayStation.
They are the only ones that are generating profits. The picture.
And they got spun off.
Oh yeah.
Like they're their own division. Like they went from being a division company.
Yeah, people are asking if they want to sell PlayStation. Actually,
I could see Apple buying it. That'd be interesting. Apple. Well,
yeah, from one high-priced company to another. Will you buy it?
It'd be like a $1,000 PS3, but it would be the best PS3 ever.
It would come only in white too.
It would re-envision the way you see PlayStation.
With such if Siri was on the PlayStation, Jesus Christ.
So basically, what we were talking about with Bad Boys 3 is basically Will Smith made a comment recently that hey, you might see a Bad Boys 3 movie in the next year and a half or so, and I have a link here to show everyone. This is basically just a quick little quip that he made.
What are you watching, Steve? God, what is the Frozen stuff? No, I'm kidding.
There's a very, very, very strong possibility of being Bad Boys within the next 12 to 16 months. And what? Frozen? What?
There was an ad.
There's an ad. Don't worry. But
there it is.
So yeah, like we were talking about, Sony is so desperate. They don't have any franchise. Obviously, all this came to head back in the end of last year when North Korea. I mean, whatever that online renegade group that hacked them and released all their dirty laundry, basically. And Sony Pictures is really afraid of their future. That's why when they saw that, oh shit, Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't meet up to their expectations. They're like, no, we gotta wipe our slate. Because they were thinking of making all these movies with Sinister Six, Amazing Spider-Man 3. They're gonna make a fucking Aunt May movie where basically she's in the prequel, she's a spy. And then she's gonna no, they were really in the.
I forgot about that.
They were gonna make a freaking Aunt May movie where she's a spy.
I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Variety actually has a list of the movies that Sony's interested in putting out, and Bad Boys 3 does show up on here.
And 4 actually. Bad Boys 3 and 4 release dates have been set.
Well, Bad Boys they were pretty profitable movies, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is Jumanji.
What?
Jumanji 2.
They're making Jumanji. They're making a Jumanji.
Sorry, Christmas of next year.
Why?
Why not?
Who is calling for this remake? Like, who is up in arms that there's no new Jumanji?
They're so desperate. They even try to cross over 21 Jump Street and Men in Black.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, maybe they'll make a crossover. Like you said, maybe they'll make a crossover. Those were both very successful franchises.
But you don't need to cross them over. I mean, that's why they're making Ghostbusters.
What they should do is cross in Jumanji with that.
Yeah.
Now that would be a hell of a movie.
That would be a hell of a movie.
No, but I mean, as long as they're making money, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know that they're are people like demanding this, or is this just a cash grab?
It's whatever that keeps them afloat, right?
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, but
what do you think?
I'm pretty sure, like, hey, it's we need to. It's time to review our books and figure out how we're gonna make a living for the next 10 years. I know. Let's put out Jumanji, the second movie.
They have a graph with all the money they made in each year, and they look at the movies where they're at bumps. Like, oh, we made money in 1996 when Jumanji came out.
Let's make a new one.
No, but.
I don't know.
I mean, that covers most of our entertainment news. We're going to move into some a little bit more heavy topics in tech. Some interesting stuff, though, that Justin made us more aware of. The first one being whether or not we can actually connect to the internet using our light bulbs or using Wi-Fi. Essentially, your Wi-Fi networks run on radio waves, and your future in radio waves is going to be limited by the amount of bandwidth that you have there. I mean, it's a physical limitation. It's purely physics about the amount of spectrum you have available to you in order to transmit data. And that's why you hear all the major telecom networks always bidding for bandwidth because the government regulates the amount of usage on given radio networks. So one way to subvert that or get around it is to use this Wi-Fi. And Justin, tell us what your thoughts on Wi-Fi is, and maybe a little bit about what it is.
Well, they're running into a lot of limitations with frequencies and bandwidth available. I mean, anybody you don't even have to necessarily live in an apartment building, but if you live in an apartment building and you try to set up a Wi-Fi network, I mean, the congestion is just crazy. When you set one up, it even asks you what channel just so you can switch the frequency. But with so many devices coming on every single year and so many people getting online now, so much interference. So they're trying to figure out new ways to make wireless happen, and they're trying to go to light waves. It's actually, I was surprised. It's the idea isn't really that new. It's been around for a while, and they've used different types of light waves to communicate for a while. But the idea is that they could essentially lower the wavelength or the frequency rather, and use light to communicate. Yeah, so they would go from, as you can see, like to 1,000 nanometer down to 1,000 nanometers. So the idea is that you could actually, and this is probably what makes it the most viable, is that you could use a light bulb or something pre-existing, like the infrastructure is already pre-existing, in order to get the light to your device. It's an interesting concept. I question interference. I mean, I'm sure there's always a technological way around it, but I question the interference because there's so much, because there is so many light sources. But there's so many weird ads on the side. But there is but the interference has me interested. Weird, like, I shouldn't say weirded out, but it's just so much interference. And then people use their internet outside. You know, they have Wi-Fi. They want to use it on their porch and stuff. If you have no direct line of sight to a light, like, how would that work? So it's an interesting solution. I don't know that it's going to ultimately be the one for internet, but I could see it definitely, and I think even that article talked about using it for what they call the Internet of Things. So if you had your refrigerator online, maybe you could put a light above it, and then you could use that to get the refrigerator online in 10, 20 years when everything's networked, so you can order everything off Amazon in 20 seconds. But it's just an interesting concept and a very interesting solution to that problem. There are a couple others, but that was the one that really caught my attention because you wouldn't have to rewire anything. It would just, the idea is that your existing infrastructure could be used. Very similar to, from what I was understanding, very similar to like a power line kit, if you're familiar with that.
So what I'm interested in is the fact that this is very similar to like infrared technology, which we've already seen in the past. A lot of your old Nokia cell phones did data transfers via a little infrared port on the top or on the side.
TV remotes
did. TV remotes work on infrared. I mean, there are a lot of technologies that already use similar tech for point-to-point data transfer. The problem here is, and you can realize this with television remotes now, is if you don't have direct line of sight, you don't have communication with one device to the other. So, like, if you're standing behind a wall and you try and use your remote, it doesn't necessarily work.
It's also really slow for data transfers. I've read one in the article somewhere. It's actually going to be way faster, but I know like with infrared, it's slow.
Yeah, I mean, in the article they actually mentioned something called, I believe they're called semaphores. It was a network of telescopes and optical signals, basically flashing lights on a tower that you had lines of them, basically just a network of them running from one city to a hilltop to another city, and you'd have this going on and on for a number of segments, so that you can transmit information using like Morse code, essentially, over long distances without actually having to send a piece of mail or send a runner or someone on a horse or something like that. So I mean, this sort of similar concept has existed in some form before. The interesting part of it now is, how cool would it be if you walked into the Gap at your local mall and your cell phone, when you walk under a light, which happens to be in the doorway, beams you an advertisement and tells you about all the sales about particular items that you normally buy at the Gap. And then when you walk over to the display case, that light that's pointed directly at the display case gives you what the prices are on your phone, so they don't actually have to have printed tags on it. This is actually a very interesting concept because it's localized information delivery. You're not.
It's like QR codes.
Yeah, you're not saturated. Like a Wi-Fi signal, like, hey, I install a router in my house. It's one of the crazy new AC routers, which get ridiculous range, couple hundred feet, and the neighbors have access to it. That's a really troublesome thing because it's a security thing, and in the instance of going to the gap, that would mean that everyone that's in the gap has to get the same exact thing, which isn't necessarily what you want to do. And having this sort of point-to-point or like direct transmission of information is really useful. And like you said, Justin, with the Internet of Things, if your TV wants to communicate with your refrigerator, as long as they have line of sight or are connected by the same light, they should be able to transmit data to one another. That's really interesting to me, at least. What's really interesting too, on top of that, is think about what your television could do in terms of transmitting data. So not only could you be watching your TV and watching an image on the screen, but you could also be receiving data from that flickering image. Now it's not visibly flickering; it's just a modulation in the frequency. Like your phone could actually be getting advertisements based on what you're watching, or information about.
I would hate that.
Oh God.
I would hate that.
Really interesting. When I read this article, I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And being in science, it's really interesting to see that type of technology come about. And I don't know, Alan, what do you think?
Well, also speaking of science, I mean, I have to be the stickler. How safe do you think this will be? I mean, of course, there's going to be, like with everything, there's always going to be a blog, there's always going to be a group of people saying, oh, this gives you cancer, or everything gives you cancers.
I mean, the article says, it's inherently safe because it's light. But yeah, I don't know about that because, I mean, infrared waves and even radio waves, they impart energy. So yeah, I mean,
they're going to affect your cells somehow, one way or another. Especially if, like you said, like standing underneath a light and this data comes down. I mean,
yeah, I see lawsuits coming from getting cancer from sitting in front of a Wi-Fi source. The internet gave me cancer. That's what I see in a headline.
Yeah. Gap gave me cancer.
As far as the modulation goes, I mean, I could see they say like monitors do it now. You get like really high-end monitors, they don't do it, but there's a thing called pulse wave modulation, and they use it. They use it for a variety of applications, but the idea is that the light is flickering so fast your eye doesn't even notice it. And they do it with LEDs too. Like LEDs, they're flickering. They're just doing it several thousand times a second. But as far as like danger goes, I mean, just like Steve said, it inherently transmits energy. I wonder if like that kind of light, like the receiver might warm up, because I mean, if you have a cell phone now and you're on it for an hour or 15 minutes, it heats up. I wonder if maybe inherently the light might make it a little bit hotter. I don't know that, but I mean, from a security standpoint, I don't see. Right now, this is more of a proof of concept of a transmission of data. The encryption of it, the encryption, I don't want to say should be trivial, but because encryption is never trivial, but the encryption of it should follow no problem, because you're just transmitting the data. I'm not going to say I don't know enough about the underlyings of it to tell you how it happens, but the encryption shouldn't be too much more complicated than Wi-Fi encryption, I would imagine.
Well, I mean,
which is incredibly complicated.
After the data transmission, right? So your bits or bytes, they don't mean anything based on the order of the transmission. So I'm not sure that that's a problem. It's just a matter of what order you're sending the data, not necessarily how you're sending it.
Yeah, I mean encryption.
Like you can encrypt Morse code by just using not Morse code.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
The encryption's a whole other topic. Like you could go on for encryption for a long time. Which is actually something that I'm going to talk about in a minute with the NSA thing, not to do a smooth transition. But, I mean, the encryption is definitely something that's important, and the next thing we were going to talk about, if Steve wants to say it, was the article I had about Jeb Bush, what he had said on the campaign trail. I mean, I'll take the him. Jeb Bush was saying that the NSA isn't powerful enough. He was, basically saying he's worried about how much, essentially, like there's a quote in here that goes, there's a place to find common ground between personal liberties and NSA doing its job. I think the balance has actually gone the wrong way. And he goes on about the Patriot Act and bulk collection of American data. He says there was no evidence that it was a violation of civil liberties. And especially since like the whole Edward Snowden, outpouring of data and the revelation of like PRISM and things like that. It was PRISM, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic. he kind of follow. It seems like he's following. He doesn't explicitly say this, but reading between the lines, it almost seems like he's following the logic that if you have nothing to hide, that you shouldn't have to worry about it, and that they should be able to collect as much data on you as you want. But I mean, me personally, I feel like that goes kind of against civil liberties. You know, you should, fair trial. You're not guilty until you're proven, you're innocent until proven guilty. And with them collecting data on pretty much anybody, bulk data collection, they'll say that the data is useless. They say that they don't, oh, it's just data. It's just, where you are and whatnot. But a lot of the times, the metadata, the data they collect overall, is actually more incriminating than the actual contents of a message. Because if I'm sending a message, and I'm a guy sending a message in the Middle East just saying hi to somebody, if they know where I am, what time I'm sending it to, who I'm sending it to, what time I sent it to them, what number I sent it to them, how long, if it was a phone call, how long the duration is, they can start putting together. They don't necessarily need the contents of the message to start forming a case around me. Not me personally, but like whoever.
Right. There are a lot of companies that actually don't provide that metadata to the government either.
They say they don't,
well,
but with the way the laws are now, they can.
They're going to have to force their hand. They're going to have to.
I mean, that's the thing about the NSA and everything. I mean, I believe. Don't get me wrong. I believe in obviously security, but I also believe that they shouldn't be collecting that kind of data. That kind of stuff, like especially one of the things that he touches on is encryption data. He's worried that encryption data is making it harder for them to do their jobs. But the reality of it is the encryption is because what they're doing. Like the encryption is important, but the recent upsurge you're seeing in encryption, I would actually argue is because they're collecting so much data. So many more people are using encryption tools because they're worried that people are collecting their data. Obviously you can't hide the fact that you were calling somebody, and you don't necessarily need to. But the idea is, to me anyway, if I'm calling Steve, and we're not doing anything nefarious, I still don't think that they should make the assumption that I'm guilty and that my data should be collected. They were saying that they were only collecting it on high-profile targets, but then there was other reports that they were collecting it on everybody aggregately. And the other thing was you didn't necessarily need to be the person they were watching if you were tangentially connected. So like if I called Steve, and Steve called somebody at his job, and somebody at his job called somebody overseas, and that person in the vicinity, and that person was in the vicinity of somebody who called a person of interest, that network essentially, I don't remember how many links it was, but that network could lead them back to collecting bulk data on all of us. Because any of us could be connected in some way, shape, or form, because they don't know the contents of the message, they just see the chains.
Yeah,
so
it's obviously subjective too, right? So it's based on their interpretation.
Well, so I mean, I think a problem with this is you have to look at it in terms of a logical and like ethical kind of standpoint. So I mean, government is a social contract, right? We all submit to government and give them power because we feel that it protects us, right?
Yep.
We're giving up some freedoms to make sure that the majority of us are safe. That we're able to participate in something collaboratively and hopefully live in peace. Now, the problem with this encryption business is my agreement to have my data and my information stored with, let's say, Google. Google has my phone number, my address, credit card numbers. I have an agreement with them for them to keep that information safe so that I can utilize it to, operate, as a free person buying things from businesses or buying things from them. Now, I do not, however, have a signed agreement because, I mean, when I say signed agreement, I mean you have this with Google with like the end user license agreements or anything else that you have signed when you save anything to your email address or anything like that. But you don't have anything like written like that or an express consent with the U.S. government, right? You being a citizen, does that mean that you are automatically subjected to, hey, I have my information on Google, and that also means that, hey, Justin, here's my credit card number, here's my email address, here's where I've been shopping for the past, 10 years. Is that information something that he has privy to because he and I both are in the same social contract of the U.S. government? Like, that's a tough thing to say, and I mean, I think this is a separate, well, not really separate, but a sub-issue of whether or not we should be infringing on personal liberties to hunt down terrorists, right? We're looking for the 10 people in the U.S. right now who want to blow up a building or something. Should I have to share my credit card numbers with Justin or Alan in order for the government to find them. That's really, really tough for me to say yes. But ultimately, that's kind of what's happened with the Patriot Act and everything that's followed after. Now, how do I feel about the NSA not having enough power to go in and take that information from someone like Google, who I have a contract with, to actually save my information? I think it should be extremely difficult for the NSA or any government organization to go in and take information from an entity like Google.
Without probable cause.
That's an interesting point, because the point he's making is the NSA doesn't have enough power. I would argue they actually already have that power. He's saying that they don't have enough power, but the argument everyone's been making and what's been in the media and what I personally feel, not even media aside, just reading like some of the things that are in these laws, they have too much power. I mean, when you think back to the Patriot Act and how many times it's been kind of revised and how many times it's been like kind of renewed, I mean, that bill originally went through in like the first or second week of October after 9/11, and they didn't even have time to read it. If you go back and actually read some of the things with that bill passing, that bill, it was like 9/11 happened, like I think it was something like September 28th, it was introduced to the floor, and then it was voted on in the first week of October. Most of those senators, it might have even been a shorter time than that, most of the senators didn't even read it. They were just told, like, this is called the Patriot Act. It's going to help us fight the war on terror, and if you vote against it, you're un-American. Yep. And it's gonna cause national security problems. So they just kind of pushed it through, and it's not. And ever since, it's been like coming to light, like, whoa, how much did we approve? How many constitutional rights are you just kind of infringing on with this act? And the idea that they can just kind of collect as much data as they want is just, it's crazy. They can collect more or less any amount of metadata they want. And as far as what you were saying, Steve, about storing information with Google, most of those EULAs, those end user license agreements now, there's a clause in there that says if, just to break it down, if law enforcement comes knocking and they ask us for their information, we're kind of bound to give it to them if they have a warrant. And even that came to light, that how many people they got warrants on with almost no evidence. If they wanted, they could either follow the path where they could just get the information if they wanted, but even if they wanted the information the legal way, they would just knock on a judge's door, say, hey, we got this person calling this person for 20 minutes, and they were in these locations, and these are kind of high-profile locations, so we want to kind of take a closer look at them. And hey, can we have a warrant, Judge?
But I mean, like those things that are in the EULA are there, at the coercion of the U.S. government.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
I sound like an anti-government guy, but I'm really not. But I mean, what I'm saying here is that this is just a problem because I think in this arena they should definitely have power to go in and get those types of records. Yes, but I think again it should be exceptionally difficult to actually pull those records. It shouldn't be, oh, Google has this in their EULA, so now we have the opportunity to just go and get it.
Well, it was added to the EULA in response, is my understanding.
Yeah, because I mean, a company like Google or Apple doesn't want to stir up trouble with the government because it looks bad and PR-wise, and ultimately, it's just easier for them to provide the data than to have to, fight legal battles with the government on your behalf.
I mean, then you start having the introduction of, like, with the government introducing bugs into encryption software like they did. That was one of the things, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the problems with the Heartbleed insecurity in OpenSSL a couple years, like a year or so ago. For those unaware, OpenSSL is a way that information is communicated over the internet. It's essentially a secure way that you communicate with websites. And it's an open source platform. That's one of the things that intrinsically makes it secure is everybody has access to what it looks like online. And there was a bug introduced into one of the versions, and that was what the big Heartbleed virus. It wasn't a virus. It was a Heartbleed vulnerability. It was susceptible to everybody, regardless of platform, as long as you were on the internet. And it was actually came to light that they believe the NSA is the one that introduced that backdoor into OpenSSL so they could get this information. And all of a sudden, I don't want to say every website, but the vast majority of the internet was all of a sudden overnight insecure, and it took them like 2 years to find. But that's the problem you're gonna start seeing is that, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that government should have no access, but the argument, it's a very, very gray area. The argument that they're making is that things happen so fast that they need access to this data immediately. They don't have time to get warrants. This guy's on the phone right now. We don't know what he's doing. We need to go now. We need to move yesterday. Yeah. So it's a gray area, but it's very difficult for me to condone that kind of stuff, especially with the way they're pushing it through. It's not, a lot of the times it doesn't seem like a fair vote. Like I said, in the case of the Patriot Act, a lot of things come up like that. It's like, hey, we have this legislation. It's getting pushed through right now. You don't have time to read it. That's one of the craziest things about laws right now. They don't even have to read the law to vote on it. So they're just pushing it. They're just getting pushed through. And a lot of times, I mean, not necessarily in this case, but a lot of times, it's, kind of things coming from other areas. You have, companies having a little bit more pull sometimes than they should to put my tinfoil hat on.
So, just a little side note. Have you guys ever seen on movies or like television where you're like watching government officials or like spies or something, and they ask like, "Hey, is this a secure line?" And, like someone says yes, but like I know there's somebody in the background when this is actually happening in real life that's like, I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting point because what was it? It just came to light that the president's something with the president. I think it was either his computer or like something in. I mean, I know the Pentagon had this problem too, where their network was totally compromised. But I think the president's like personal email got compromised. Like the security is very difficult. Don't get me wrong, but it's just almost nothing you can totally say is secure. But there are things that you can do to make it more secure, and that's kind of what the original article is getting at. Is he's saying, look, all these encryption things are coming up, and they're making our jobs way more difficult. And it's kind of like, these encryption things are kind of coming up because you guys made it so obvious that you're collecting data. Like, and I mean, this isn't necessarily a new issue, but it's so much more widespread now. I mean, there was that conspiracy. Well, I don't remember what movie it was, but they were talking about. I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was that. He said, the government collects information off your library card to see what books you're taking out, and this was in like the 90s or the 80s or something. So like,
collection. No, it's not.
No, it was I want to say it was 7, but I'm not sure. I think it was 7.
By the way, it was Russian hackers that hacked into Obama's emails last year.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, there's all these encryption things coming up, but I would say like some of it's in response. It's like, hey, all of a sudden, people like use the internet. They're like, oh, everything's great. We have antivirus. We'll have security. We'll have all this. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's like all these bugs. I mean, when that Prism thing came to light, there was some pretty heinous stuff that came out, like government intercepting shipments of hard drives and infecting the firmware on the hard drives. That was actually, I'm sorry, that was a virus. Never mind, that was something different. But I mean, there are some really interesting security problems out there, and I mean, there's almost nothing that the only way you can totally be secure anymore is to be offline, and obviously that's not practical. So the security end of it, just trying to keep up. For anybody who follows Neil deGrasse Tyson or Star Talk, he just had a huge like a 2-episode interview with Edward Snowden, and love him or hate him. I mean, I'm not weighing in on that. The whole conversation was incredibly interesting. He talks about basic human rights, the idea that people, even though they're not guilty of something, should still be fighting for personal rights, like personal privacy, because kind of like a crime anywhere is a crime everywhere kind of concept. Sorry, I didn't mean to hog that.
No, it goes to like what we were talking about. I mean, like we were talking about Minority Report a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. It's basically kind of like that, where like, is it justified for them to kind of punish you before you actually commit the crime?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very as you can see, I'm very passionate about that kind of stuff.
Ultimately, to answer the question of whether or not the NSA needs more power, my answer is no. Well, how about you guys?
My answer would be, my answer is right now they need way less power. But in terms of overall like aggregate power, I would say they need more oversight into the power they have, because I feel like they have all this power. I mean, there were people when the NSA came out that they didn't even know how much data they had at one point. But that's just
Alan. No.
What's that?
NSA doesn't need more power.
No, they don't need any more power. I completely agree with. I was gonna what Justin said. Basically, they have enough power, and they need better oversight, because it seems like there's not enough oversight in terms of like what's considered a flag, essentially. What's considered like basically a reason for them to even go and look into these things. That's what I think.
So I mean, in terms of like accountability from governments to corporations, like this is like one of those areas where like, yeah, maybe we should think twice or 3 times or a lot before giving the government more power over these organizations.
Move to Canada.
But
Switzerland.
I think it's important for government to have oversight in other areas though, like this next article on Verizon. actually talking about their FiOS rollouts and the sort of fiascos that they've had. I mean, there's a article here that Justin provided that actually shows a map of places in the United States which actually have Verizon FiOS access. And I mean, you could just as easily see if you go to Verizon's webpage, if you look up at home and see. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting to get a poll from anyone who watches this to find out whether or not FiOS is available in your area. I'll actually go ahead and do this after the show's over and post it in the comments underneath the video, just for a little shits and giggles. But, I mean, what do you guys think in terms of more government oversight over someone like Verizon and accountability for making sure that, hey, let's get FiOS out to some of these homeowners who are really asking for it, and these businesses who really need it? What do you guys think, Alan?
I actually know this feeling all too well because I used to have Verizon DSL, and I remember waiting for FiOS for like, let's see, I remember like 2005 they said, oh, don't worry, FiOS is gonna come. I mean, we waited 8 fucking years until we switched over to Comcast, and we only switched over to Comcast because that's in our area. That's the only provider that we have that's high-speed internet. So it sucks. I mean, this is definitely not the first time. I mean, there's a reason why Verizon's not pushing this. Obviously, they don't see the value in it. And of course, they're going to exploit the system and use backdoor channels. And unfortunately, I think that the government's helping them. Some of these officials are helping them, and they need to find better checks and balances where they can kind of stop this. But unfortunately, that's in a what you call it, in a not magical world, in a
Ideal.
yeah, ideal world. Thank you.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, is FiOS available where you are, and what are your thoughts?
FiOS is not available where I am.
I think you live in Seawarn, right?
I live in Woodbridge.
Okay.
I got to get back on my soapbox now that I've told the government where I live, and they can come blackbag me again.
Oops.
I got to get back on my soapbox. No, I mean, the article talks about, and this has actually been a pretty big problem with FiOS, was they made this big promise, and the government actually subsidized it pretty heavily, and they're continuing actually to offer subsidies to these high-speed internet companies because, well, for 2 reasons. One, the infrastructure, like actually a lot of the infrastructure in America, is crumbling. It's old. The copper network that they're running a lot of the telecoms are running, and a lot of the information is going over wires that were run years ago, and it works, but the infrastructure is just terrible. So they're trying to subsidize. They're giving these companies huge sums of money to run these new cables. And Verizon came out and said, "Hey, we're running fiber optic. It's the future. Let's get it out there. We want to make money and whatnot." And then I don't even remember when they announced FiOS, but it was 5 years ago. What was it?
2005. I remember.
It was like 2000. I'm sorry. It was like 2010 when they decided that they weren't going to run it anymore.
That's when they were. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first announcements for FiOS actually happened in 2003.
Oh, okay. Wow, even earlier than that.
But the point is that the government gave them all this money, and that's actually what the article was about. The government gave them all this money to run because they wanted them to improve the infrastructure that the copper that it was run on, and they wanted it to be run into rural and poor areas or like low-income areas. And Verizon just came out in 2010 and said, "Look, we're not running it anymore. Essentially, they ran out of subsidies. The government wasn't. I guess I'm assuming the government wasn't giving them any more subsidies, which seems crazy. Because actually, another article I linked talks about how in August they actually turned down money for subsidies, and it actually goes to a better point. Verizon is trying to push people more onto wireless. They're trying to fill in the coverage areas with 4G, and it works for 2 reasons. One, it helps them roll out their cell phone network, but 2, they charge a hell of a lot more for 4G internet than they do for FiOS. I mean, FiOS is like $100 a month, and you get unlimited internet access. 4G is like they charge per gigabyte. But what ended up happening in the article is the mayors of these towns are going, "You promised us, we gave you money, and you promised us you're going to roll out 4G to all these low-income areas, and all of a sudden you're not." And it turns out that a lot of the apartment owners that are complaining, Verizon's like, "No, they told us not to," because it was written in the contract, like, "Hey, if they tell us not to run it, we don't have to run it." And they're essentially making it very difficult for the apartment owners to say yes. They'll say, like, "We're going to rip up your grass. We're going to do this. It's going to cost you money." And all these mayors came back and said, "Hey, you promised us we're gonna get this 4G internet. Where is it?" And Verizon's just like, "We'll run it. It's coming. It's coming." But they have they're trying every loophole in the book to get out of having to run this cable because they don't want to run the cable.
Of course not.
They want to roll out wireless internet. I'm assuming because it's making them so much money. It's making them a hell of a lot of money every quarter.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry, let me get off my soapbox. I'm stepping
No,
down.
that's fine. Steve?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with the fact that the rollout of FiOS is kind of slow, but I also kind of understand though at the same time.
It's not slow. It's stopped. They're not rolling it out anymore.
I mean, as far as running like landline services, it's very labor, very capital. There's a lot of capital investment that needs to happen, right? And it's also a time thing. But if you look at the map again on the other article from Gizmodo, I mean, you see that the coverage area is really, really, really tiny. It's really small, and concentrated here in the Northeast too. And that's where the complaints are coming out of because that's where it was marketed heaviest. But ultimately, I don't know if I really want, from a practical standpoint, to say that we need to have something like FiOS available to us. Now, that being said, I do use cable internet service, but that copper landline service is already installed and has been installed, and it uses the infrastructure that's already there. I mean, for Verizon to roll out more FiOS lines, they literally have to drag new cables in. I think that's very, very intensive, very costly on the part of Verizon. But at the same time, I think, the government should have a little more oversight over them completing contracts and making sure that they're standing up to their end of the bargain. I don't need to have them, fill up the entire country in terms of that chart with coverage, but at least, keep to their agreements with the original plan at least.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of the subsidies was the network, like the network you're using to connect to the internet, is aging. It's old. It's very old. So the government knows that this is aging. It's going to become a problem. So they're trying to kind of be more proactive and replace these lines before they crumble. So they're saying, hey, we're just the government. We can't go out and run lines. So here's a bunch of money to a telecom. Will you run lines? And they wanted to really heavily invest in fiber optic because obviously replace copper with copper is only going to last so long. Replace it with fiber optic, it's going to be kind of the future. And Verizon's just turning around and saying, you know what, we're making more money in wireless. It's not the ideal. It's not going to be the best, but you know what, we're making a hell of a lot more money in it. Let's do copper. And it just kind of it speaks to a lot of the kind of it just speaks to a lot of the kind of coercion that ends up happening.
Well, one thing that I did notice is in that article on Gizmodo talking about the public subsidies. I mean, I understand that they probably are receiving money from the government at some level, but the writer of the article specifically calls up this release from New York State about Verizon being granted residential rate increases on existing customers and calling that a subsidy on the part of the government. I don't think that's a subsidy on the part of the government. The government didn't directly give Verizon money to say, hey, like, you need to build up the network. They're just allowing them to charge more money so that, hey, maybe we can. I mean, this isn't a contract saying that they must improve their networks and drag new FiOS lines out. This paper was just essentially saying, yeah, you can go ahead and increase your rates so you can do that kind of capital investment. Because there's no company in the world that would say, okay, to rate increases with a knife in their back saying that you have to do something. So I mean, exactly. It's definitely hey, this is sort of a two-way street kind of thing.
They did turn down money though to roll it out. They did that 2 months ago. There was an article. They turned down $500 million to roll out new cable.
But I mean, speaking to the future, like the government saying, hey, our current systems are aging. Let's go ahead and roll out stuff that's going to be newer, faster, and better, and able to replace the existing technologies. I think wireless networks are that thing, because ultimately, and thinking from a green perspective, it's very resource consuming to drag new copper lines or new metal lines, along with all the other things that you have to do in order to put those lines in the ground or hang them for poles. So ultimately, I think putting up towers is a lot better in the green sense, but also in sort of the technological sense when moving on to the next technology. Because ultimately, I don't want to run a cable at all. I want to just have everything wireless.
You would ideally still run a cable into your house. I mean, that's me. Maybe I'm having like an old man perspective, but I mean, just in general, there's still a lot of issues with telecoms, internet, and just the way the government works. I mean, just as an example, I should have looked this up. I would love to see how the Google Fiber rollout is going versus the FiOS rollout, because Google Fiber has been going way shorter amount of time, and I feel like it might actually be catching up. Likewise, just speaking, what the government really wants, what they're really trying to push for, is you start going into these rural areas, you start going more central into the U.S., the internet coverage is sparse, like it's barely there. So they're really trying to roll out there too. But just in total, like as an aggregate, like the other links I linked, there's just other issues going on between just government and kind of like the way corporations are kind of like able, and I'm not like saying I'm not anti-corporation or anything, but just the way that companies are kind of interacting with the government and able to kind of coerce. Like one of the articles I linked was about the FCC and how it's control over, speaking of wireless, like government, Verizon Wireless. When we switched all the TVs over from analog to digital, from like analog TV to DTV a couple years ago, all that, going back to what we were talking about the Wi-Fi, trying to bring it all in circle.
Yeah.
They freed up all those wireless frequencies, and they sold them. FCC says, we're not using them, we'll sell them. So Verizon bought a bunch of what they called the C block, and you can see in that article that Steve's showing, part of the agreement was that they cannot limit how the device uses that part of the internet. You cannot limit how the device connects to the internet. You can see right there it says about tethering. You couldn't limit it with tethering, and this was back when Verizon still had unlimited internet. And they bought all the C block, signing off on that agreement, and then they turned around and didn't make tethering free, which is in direct violation of that agreement. They said tethering is going to be free if you buy the C block, and they turned around and didn't do it. So eventually, a couple years later, they switched over and they had that tiered internet system, and the FCC goes, "Oh, you didn't follow our rules. We said that it has to be free tethering," and they only fined them like $1.25 million. I think the article said. That's like a very small. It was a pretty small.
Slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it was a very small amount of money, and the worst part is Verizon didn't change the way they do it. If you still have if you're still under the old contract, you don't get free tethering. So if you never went to the only time they introduced free tethering was with that new plan they just rolled out a couple years ago, the share everything.
Oh.
And this got actually brought up to the FCC's attention because they actually went as far as to block tethering apps that were in the Google Play Store.
Wow.
So they were doing everything they could because they could make extra money every. Yeah, they can make extra money every single month.
Definitely.
The people that were tethering. The FCC goes, no, what are you talking about? That was not our agreement. They only fined them $1.25 million, and to this day, if you still have an old contract, you have to pay for tethering.
Yeah, that's the trying to double charge someone for connecting to the service.
Double dipping. It's a company. What do you expect?
I mean, that's the problem. Like a lot of the times, I'm not saying that there's any kind of coercion there, but just the FCC's, not super enforcing these rules, and there's just a lot of problems. And just the last article that I linked having to do with this topic was, when Comcast did the NBC merger.
Yeah.
There was that woman. She was part of the merger. She was part of one of the people in the FCC that was voting on it.
Yep.
She said, hey, let's push this through. She was one of the votes for the NBC merger, and it was a big antitrust thing. Should a connection company own a media company? Are they going to give them preference? How's this going to work? She said push it through. Very short time later, I think within a couple months, she was an executive at Comcast. She got hired. Yeah. She left the government, got hired by Comcast. So it's just a lot of coercion. Like it just seems like a lot of times the people are in bed with each other, and it's not the best.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't really like that at the top end of corporations. You do have a lot of sort of floating in and out of government positions too, oversight committees and things like that. You have a lot of power already as a CEO of a major company, and on top of that, the government looks to you to be a leader, and by doing so, you're leading and changing decisions that might affect your own company for the positive, and there's a lot of chance for greed to take over, and that's unfortunate, but it's sort of the way that things are set up as they are. So moving on, finishing up with our tech segment, we would just want to kind of finish out very quickly with some gaming news. First thing is that Microsoft just yesterday had their Windows 10 hardware or Windows 10 hardware show, their conference, basically showing off a lot of the newer technologies that they're coming out with, some newer devices that they're going to be launching, of which one of them's a Surface laptop, which is interesting, which you can check out. There is no link in the description below, but you can just Google it, the Surface Pro laptop. In addition, something else that's come up that with relationship to gaming is the HoloLens, which was something that already existed. They just announced something called Project XRay, and essentially it's a wearable while you're wearing the HoloLens. Essentially digital wearables. So you can see in this image that this guy who's wearing the HoloLens visor has this sort of Mega Man type blaster stuck to his hand. And he's fighting something that's kind of projected on an image on a wall. I think this is kind of interesting because it looks very similar to something out of like Mass Effect, like tech armor. But I think this is an interesting step towards virtual reality gaming, something that we've always kind of dreamed of ever since playing, with the Virtual Boy in Toys R Us way back in the day. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, is this something that you would, be interested in playing with and seeing come to life?
I mean, it reminds me of the PlayStation Move actually. Was it the PS3 Move or PS4? Whatever. Yeah, the Wii, the Kinect, all these things. And the problem with, to be honest, with VR right now is that.
Well, I think we're talking specifically about the wearable aspect, right? So, it follows your limb movements just like, every other motion device that's out there.
Yeah.
But the HoloLens projection of stuff around your limbs, right?
So it's more dangerous then, basically. Sorry. It's basically more dangerous because see him like ducking behind stuff. Like, think about it. Here's the thing. That's a control setting. Think about it. People that are buying these things aren't the smartest people. I mean, I'm not the smartest people. I'm gonna be stupid, and I'm gonna
Verizon,
and I'm just gonna.
I'm sorry, not Verizon. I'm sorry, Microsoft's X-ray project looks a lot like Mass Effect tech armor. Like I said, it's
okay, but that's on the screen though. That's not like it's not like it's gonna happen in real life like that. I mean, it's cool. It's cool.
Tech demo versus real life.
Well, I think there's implications with it, though, because let's say if you have a HoloLens object that's attached to your arm, if you're wearing the VR lens and you touch or interface with a control that's holographic on your arm, then you can still interface with it. So it's basically becomes an interface within the interface, right? This is actually something that's really interesting.
I think Alan's right with the limitations. I think it's going to run into the same problem the Wii and the PS3 had, or the PS Move rather, but I actually don't think that this is going to be a big gaming play. I feel like it's going to go the way of the Kinect, and they're going to start using it for things that you wouldn't expect. Like the Kinect, when they came out with it, was this big gaming thing, but it didn't catch on. Where it started catching on was like independent software developers. Like doctors would use it so they could sterilize their hands but read through X-rays. I think this is going to be big in communications, and I feel like when they miniaturize it, it might actually replace laptops, because if you could just put like a VR goggle on and you could have a screen anywhere, you wouldn't, like, everybody's talking about how heavy, how heavy tablets are and how heavy this is. You could just have like a set of goggles on, you could have a tablet anywhere that's weightless. If they could actually nail like the inertial, like the ability to go like depth-wise and everything, I don't think it'll be big in gaming, but I think it'll be big in interfaces.
I completely agree. It's just the developers don't take advantage of this technology, right? I mean, they didn't take any advantage of over the Kinect, the Wii. I mean, you can play Wii bowling, great. Nothing. Awesome. There's nothing else for it.
I definitely see that. I mean, the Kinect is a really big player in the robotics industry because they use that sensor that's on there for all sorts of crazy detection and interfacing with humans. I mean, I guess you guys are right. I mean, it's more of like a tech play at doing different things rather than necessarily gaming. But ultimately, I think this might be, a different means for us to interface with our game, because we really haven't had much beyond the controller or the mouse and keyboard, outside of like the Kinect or the Wii.
It's gonna stay that way,
I mean, neural interfaces would be cool, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. They go based on like ROI. There's going to be way more return on investment for that in, I feel like, the PC market, maybe the maker market, robotics market, things like that, than there would be in the gaming market. I mean,
Yeah. Household gaming.
sometimes people don't want to be. Sometimes people don't want to be that active when they're playing video games.
So,
Exactly.
If I want to,
speaking to return on investment, I mean, how do you guys feel about Microsoft not including a physical copy of Halo 5 Guardians in their limited collector's edition that has their statue, the 160 some odd dollar collector's edition? How do you guys feel
Justin,
about
you wanna go?
not including that hard copy in there?
I think that it's gonna break the company if they have to include a disc in a $160 limited edition. I mean, like, I could see why they're doing it, because I feel like one of the reasons they're doing it is because you can preload the game, and it makes, they can kind of get a better idea of how many people have purchased it, how many people are going to play it day one, I guess. Digital, everything's kind of going digital, and that's for better or worse. I mean, like I was saying earlier, there's not a lot of internet central part of the country, and even some of the outskirts, they have problems with internet speed, so digital copies aren't always the best. They give you an option, like you said, that's what the article is about, to trade it in, but if you look at the window, they only give you like a week or like 2 weeks to trade it in. So what happens if you buy that game, and what if you buy what if they're clearancing the limited edition at like Best Buy or GameStop in like a month, and you want the physical copy? You're kind of screwed.
Yeah, the window is open from October 20th to November 1st. The game comes out on October 28th. But
How does that even happen? Wait, what?
Yeah.
yeah, well, the window's open before the release of the game. Maybe that's for some sort of like sweepstakes winners that get early access.
What
or
the hell?
something.
That means you have 3 days from the time you purchase the game to get a physical copy. Like those chat logs are gonna. What if you can't get in? Like they're gonna be overwhelmed if maybe people don't want the physical game that much, but.
Yeah, it's a growing trend. Physical media is dying off. I mean, going back to, it takes up space. Just going back to about laying down fiber optical cables. I mean, they're going wireless because it's less footprint that we're going to leave on our planet, obviously, right? And it's going to be more costly to these companies. I think that it's really sucky that they make it really difficult for you to just to get physical anything, right? Like if you read through the description, like you said, it's going to be probably a huge line. You're going to probably have to talk to a bot basically and try to figure out, can I get this, this physical copy?
Yeah, the thing that's really interesting to me is that a lot of companies will tell you to, hey, don't provide your password or your CD key to anyone on the internet, especially tech support or anything like that. And they specifically say in this release that, hey, you need to open a contest us page, chat with Microsoft support, and inform them, hey, I want a physical copy, and then provide them with your email address and the 25-character token for the actual game. So,
and then some dude from the NSA sees it and steals your copy of Halo.
I mean, I totally just see like a 12-year-old like online, not knowing what they're doing, and they end up chatting with, a friend on their friends list who decides to put a Microsoft name in front of their user account or something like that, and then they're weak to steal copies of the games. I mean, this is just, it seems a little absurd, the method that you have to actually collect your physical copy of the game when it should have just been in the box.
Well, there's one other argument with that. Not everybody has the internet to always download it. So the idea that everybody
internet, rather.
But the other problem that I would see is I support Steam as a platform because they have in place, like, if we go out of business, not that I think Microsoft's going to go out of business, but if they go out of business, if Steam goes out of business, they talked about releasing CD keys so that you could always use the game. If they decide that the Halo, they want to, Microsoft goes out of business, how does that work? If that's one problem that they've been consistently having with the software as a service kind of thing. But I mean, I guess the game's only as good as long as they keep the servers up, and Microsoft's been kind of notorious. Maybe I'm thinking of PlayStation. Notorious for shutting down the servers. Yeah.
It's PlayStation.
Yeah.
Xbox Live is better.
Well, I think there's something to be said about having physical copies of the game, not just because of the actual game and the software on the disc, but I think there's something to be said about having the box. I mean, do you remember going to the computer store or like CompUSA or going to Toys R Us and like looking on the shelf and checking out the box for like the game? And like seeing the box art and like the screenshots on the back and the description and like getting really excited for the game, because like back when we were growing up, like you couldn't just go on the internet and watch a video of someone streaming the game and like watch me play kind of thing. Like I mean, there wasn't any of that. You had to rely purely on, hey, this box art looks pretty cool, or the image in the front of your N64 cartridge. Like, those are the kinds of things that were important in order to try and get you to buy the game up front. And I think they're part of the art. They're part of sort of the larger thing that is this game. I don't think it's just necessarily the digital copy that you might have downloaded on Steam or from Microsoft on your Xbox One. How do you guys feel about like box art and that type of stuff? Is that sort of something that hey, we can just forgo?
Listen, Steve, I'm a hoarder. I'm a sentimentalist. I still have all these movie stuffs from like 2008. So like I hoard everything. So for me, like one of the reasons why I didn't pre-order StarCraft Legacy of the Void initially is because you can pre-order it, but it's only a digital copy. I wanted a physical copy because I bought a physical copy of all the other ones. But back to your point about box art and everything, because of this whole growing trend of like physical media kind of dying down, I feel like they're kind of that kind of aspect is slowly dying down as well. You could talk about the same thing with movies, DVDs. People don't buy Blu-rays or DVDs anymore because back then, when you got a DVD, you get all these special extra features. But the thing is that exactly. But now you don't even have to do that. Like right now, you see Avengers: Age of Ultron. You see the gag reel and all that stuff on YouTube. So why would you even bother buying the actual DVD when you can just go on YouTube and just watch that on there? So it feels like all that that kind of the box art, all that physical media is dying down because of this.
Well, I
Justin?
think there's two other things. The kind of person that's going to spend $160 on there's like $160 for the limited edition with the statue, is probably going to want the box art. I mean, that's something that they're going to display. That's something that they want. Yeah, well, whatever. Different strokes. Different strokes, different folks.
Hey, I have the freaking night vision goggles from COD Modern Warfare 2.
But that's what I mean. The type of person who wants that, is going to want the box art. But there's one other thing that, like, I shouldn't say problem, a big industry change for these digital copies is trade-in. I mean, you want Halo 3 now? You go to I probably wouldn't recommend going to GameStop for a good price, but you go to GameStop, you go to eBay, you buy it from your friend. Wherever you go buy a used copy of the game. I mean, what they started to do is put these codes in there for different things in the game. But now what they're trying to do is make it so that the game is kind of like PC games. The game is totally untradeable, and I guess would be the way to say that. And not that I'm saying that these industries necessarily need to be propped up, but just from as a consumer standpoint, like, 3 years from now I want to play Halo 5. I don't, if you see the price of digital games online. I mean, when even for old games, you go on the Xbox store and those games $4 on eBay, $30 for the digital copy.
Yeah.
It's gonna make everything that's old way more expensive. I would argue it might even encourage more the kind of like emulation ROM scene. I don't know how viable that is right now, but in 30 years when we have our quantum computers and whatnot, and our Jaws holograms and our lace-up Nikes. Maybe they could emulate an Xbox One.
Justin, do you care about the box art at all? Are you someone who keeps old game boxes floating around in your closet or something?
I love the box art, but that being said, I don't really miss the box art because I don't need that much kind of crap in my life. I have enough crap in my life, so I won't really care. I would love the box art, but I won't necessarily miss it.
So speaking of sort of artistic sort of gaming expression. Ubisoft actually announced or showed a teaser trailer for the new Far Cry Primal this week, and we found this article here on IGN, and basically it's going to be set in the year 10,000 BC, which is unusual from an artistic standpoint in most games, because there are very few games that take place in sort of a prehistoric era, at least in my opinion, or probably not enough, maybe.
Right.
I think it's sort of interesting if you check out the video, if you get a moment. I think it's only a minute or so. I am a little bit excited to see what they try and do in the prehistoric era with sort of like tribes fighting and mammoths stomping all over you. But I'm a little bit worried that there's not going to be as much to do as in sort of a modern game. Where you have guns and you can build items and stuff like that, because like, and are you gonna be able to like make a bow and arrow, or are you gonna have to like think about it first. Like, I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on the setting for Far Cry Primal?
I actually never have played Far Cry. I mean, I have all the Far Cry games thanks to Steam sales and Humble Bundle, but I have tons of games, never touched. But the game, I watched the little trailer. It looks good. It looks fucking awesome, actually. It kind of reminds me of a Don't Starve a little bit, I think, where you have to kind of hunt and kind of survive. And I mean, obviously this is better with better graphics and with physics, but it also, like, the whole thing with the mammoth, it kind of reminds me of another game called Monster Hunter. So I kind of hope that you get to play with like your friends, where you basically go out for a hunt to try to hunt down these animals and stuff like that.
Justin died. He got stomped on. Somebody throw spears.
I'll be over here. I would not
get
get stomped on. I'm trying over here trying to make fire. I'm trying to make fire.
He's thinking about making that bow. How does this bow thing work?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's also like it's based on how detailed Ubisoft wants to be in terms of like this whole survival and weapon customization thing, right? Because obviously if they don't give you that option, you can't just be like, hey, I want this and this to make a bow, right? It depends on Ubisoft and what kind of freedom they give you. What do you think, Justin?
I think the setting's kind of awesome, actually. I only played Far Cry 2. And I played very little of it. I don't know why I lost interest in it. I don't remember why. And I never played Far Cry 3. I heard it was awesome. And I'm kind of guilty of what Alan did. You get those Steam sales. I'm not really huge gaming right now. I haven't been for a couple of years. Yeah. But you want one game on Steam, and one game in a bundle of 15 games is like $3. You end up with like 100 games in Steam. But as far as the setting goes, like, I think the setting's awesome. I think that's going to be a very what they do with it. I don't know. That game, the trailer looked awesome. But the setting, I could definitely see the setting being very interesting. It's very untapped. It's not a modern shooter, which seems to be the growing trend, kind of like World War II was like 6 or 7 years ago. So 10,000 BC seems kind of interesting. The idea that it's not going to be a lot of guns, it's going to be a lot of like melee. Probably, I would love to see like a survival element. Maybe you have to drink so much water, or eat so much food every day. Maybe you get different predators at night, because they had like a day-night cycle in Far Cry. I could see them doing. I had never played Minecraft.
I never played Minecraft either.
I don't actually own Minecraft myself. However, I'm sure all of us have seen it. So
I've seen it.
Are you suggesting that they should do Far Cry Primal in the graphics of Minecraft?
Oh God! I would be less inclined. I would be less inclined to play it now.
Alan, you're on your way to the top.
So I mean, I think there's something to be said about like survival type games, because something like Minecraft. Minecraft is huge right now, right?
Is Minecraft a survival game?
Yeah, I mean, there's food and water that you have to deal with. There's day-night cycles.
I didn't know.
It's about crafting. I mean, you have to, build new armor, in order to explore new areas, build weapons.
I thought it was a lot like Gary's mod.
So I mean, there's two modes. There's survival mode and there's a creators mode, where you can just like build objects and stuff like that.
Okay.
But there is a survival mode where you go out and sort of explore, and in order to get access to new areas, you have to build new equipment and new weapons. So I mean, that's sort of similar to like what we saw in like Far Cry 3. So I did, however, play Far Cry, the first one. I didn't play 2. I played Far Cry 3. I also played the Crysis series, which is sort of separate from the Far Cry universe. But Far Cry 3 was like set on some jungle islands out in the Pacific, and it had a really tight storyline. Basically, you're like a survivor who gets kidnapped, a survivor of like a
skydiving, I think.
Yeah, a group goes skydiving, and you get captured by pirates or something on the island. Anyways, the whole thing here is you can explore the island, try and survive by gathering materials to make new weapons or make new armor. Also to allow you to get new powers, like being able to slow time and do weird stuff.
Also,
like that.
It didn't seem like anybody was speaking any English in the trailer. It seemed like they were speaking some kind of ancient dialect. So that angle could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's actually very unusual, because like even like games that are set in like Asia or in Europe, for some reason all the characters speak English really well.
Yeah. Exactly.
What do they call it? The universal tongue? Was it in Mass Effect or something?
Mass Effect. Yeah. Also with Skyrim and everything too, right? Like, why do they speak English?
Oh, Mass Effect should be something that all three of us could talk about in another video, because we've all played all 3.
Oh my god.
And we could probably talk about
I could go on about Mass Effect for
Galaxies.
hours.
I have bought every freaking DLC. I've played them all within 2 months of each other.
I love Mass Effect and I hate Mass Effect at the same time.
You talking about the ending?
I was so pissed off.
The colors, dude. The colors.
Different colors.
I was green. I didn't do blue. I didn't do red. I was like fucking going green. And then all the conspiracy theories about the ending and how it was like a dream, and I was like, I just sat there. I was like, you guys, I was like, are you out of your mind? And then the developer comes out. I was like, no, none of what they said is true. That's not what we were going for. We were just being idiots.
I mean, they retcon. Well, they put extra scenes because like
more the director's cut. The director's cut.
Yeah,
it's free DLC.
I got that ending.
Yeah, but then like all the plot holes at the ending introduced, like when the mass. Spoiler alert! Move ahead like 10 seconds, but
no,
when the mass relay
it doesn't matter.
When the mass relay exploded at the very end of the game, trapping every civilization in the solar system, simultaneously retconning the entire DLC with the Batarians, where the massive mass relay blowing up extinguished their entire race and their entire galaxy.
Yep.
Meanwhile, it didn't touch even the closest planet. Oh, by the way, all these people are now trapped. Good luck. Go and survive.
Yeah, because they all came to Earth to help them.
First of all, the ending was crap because of the colors. Second of all, everybody's trapped in the solar system. Third, all of a sudden the mass relays are like more like a firework than a nuclear bomb. I'm like, what the hell? What?
Well, they could be repaired, technically.
That thing fucking blew up. That thing was in pieces. They didn't even know how the fucking thing worked.
Well, they changed it in the director's cut. It didn't actually like fully on like explode.
No, they didn't
fully kind of like chipped a little bit on the side.
But was it working? Because I never went back and replayed it. Because fuck that. Just fuck that.
Well, we don't know whether or not it was working or not at the end.
They didn't know how there's no way they could repair that. They didn't even know how that fucking thing worked. They just said, we found this thing that they made 1 million years ago. Turns out 1 million years ago, they didn't make it either. They also found it and also didn't know how it worked. It was like nobody knew how these things worked. They just knew that they worked. So
they just used it.
It was that ending. That game was amazing. That last like half hour of story, fucking garbage. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, because 1 and 2 were so good. Well, I thought 2 was
awesome.
2 was amazing. 1 I couldn't stand because of that stupid buggy thing you had to drive around.
Yeah, I
hated that so much. I was stuck on that for like a year and a half, and I was like, fuck this game. And then I sat down and was like, you know what, it's toughed it out.
The RPG elements in 1 were awesome. 2 kind of refined it. They took a lot of the RPG out, and the shooting got really tight. Yeah. 3 was an extension of 2, but kind of sucked because they made it really approachable for people that didn't play any of the games. And then at the end of 3, I was like, fuck this shit, and I just never wanted to see 3 again.
No.
It's like, I'm going to go back and play 2 and make my own ending.
Are you guys excited for the new game coming out? Are you interested at all in playing the new one?
Andromeda? Yeah. Andromeda, right? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, the Galaxies or Andromeda or something. I don't remember what it's called.
I saw a little bit of it. I'm a little excited, but after years later,
same universe. I know.
Just so.
But it's the same universe, and we love that universe, regardless of how bad the freaking ending.
Well, aren't they revamping it? Or aren't they going to change stuff? Like you're in Andromeda, so you're not going to be in. Because Mass Effect took place in the Milky Way. I think they're going for Andromeda because they want to make it completely different.
You might be right. I'm not completely
because they're not gonna be like there's not gonna be any Citadel, or maybe they'll have a new Citadel.
My understanding is that there's no ties to the Commander Shepard storyline.
I think they're trying to reboot it because it's not BioWare doing it anymore. It's EA. Well, EA bought BioWare, right? Yeah. And then the doctors who ran BioWare left. And that was during like the transition from 2 to 3.
Well, apparently BioWare's still running this one. I'm looking at on.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain BioWare's still in charge.
No, but I mean like BioWare is not BioWare anymore. BioWare.
Well, yeah, it's not the initial.
It's like the whole Infinity Ward thing. What happened with Infinity Ward and I think EA too. That year that EA was voted the most hated company in America.
Yeah, they kind of screwed up a lot of things.
I mean, they made an assload of money, so. And people still buy it. People still buy Call of Duty every single year.
Yeah, I mean, this new Mass Effect it's gonna take place after the first 3 games, so it's still gonna be somewhat in the continuity, but in a different galaxy, obviously.
I don't know. I mean, it could be interesting as long as they don't fuck it up, just like they did in Mass Effect 3.
Just make a good game. That's all. Sorry,
Hey guys, all your choices matter in that at the end you're gonna get a bunch of emails that talk about them, and then you're gonna have 3 choices to make.
Oh yeah.
Hey, this is the Rachni Queen from Game 1. Thanks a lot. We're doing really good now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. All these stupid emails. I'm like, oh, remember you saved my life? Hey,
Yeah.
thank you.
All of a sudden your spam folder just got filled at the end of the game. You're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah,
I'm reading all these emails. I'm like, oh, all these people are gonna be there at the end. No.
No.
You get a shitload of emails. You get a little bit of a bump in whatever paragraph you needed to end the game. Get a little bump in that because you have a bunch of support. Oh, and you could pick one of 3 choices. Like, man. And you get a little like hologram of a child being like, none of this shit matters. You're not gonna understand it anyway, so just choose one.
Anyway.
Yeah, though that kid was just like, you're not gonna understand. We're above understanding. You're just human. You're not gonna understand our. It was the laziest story. Like I remember in 1 or 2 when you talked to the Reaper for the first time. He's like, we're above human understanding. And I was like, and I said out loud. I was playing it by myself, and I said out loud to myself, I was like, let me translate that for you. We're storytellers, and we don't know what the fuck we're doing. Like we're above human understanding. No, you fucking come in and you wipe out an entire galaxy.
I'm sorry, you're speaking English to me?
Yeah, no, exactly.
He's passionate about this. Steve, leave him alone.
I think they explained that. Didn't they say like they read the biometric thing, read their mind, and they spoke in their tongue? The Protheans did the same thing. Like you came up to the hologram and it started speaking Prothean, and then all of a sudden it started speaking English, and they're like,
exactly.
We've adjusted our dialect. That was fine. Like that was cool. But like
oh god.
You can understand what we're saying, you just can't understand why we're saying it. And I was like, oh, they'll explain that by the end of the game. Now, at the end of the game, they're like, you still can't understand what we're saying. You still don't know why we're doing. Maybe we don't know why we're doing it.
Yeah, it's like looking for the meaning of life. You're like, oh, we're not gonna give it to you because you won't understand. And we're like,
see you guys, we're going to Andromeda. We'll see you guys later. Have fun in the solar system.
GG, good game.
Fast relay screwed, so you guys, we'll be back. Like what the hell?
Sorry, Steve. I know. Obviously, we're going over time.
No, this needs to be heard. The world needs to know about Mass Effect.
I know everyone has a lot of angst about Mass Effect. I mean, I definitely have my gripes with it. I thought it was good, even the last one. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some elements to it that I was like, there's a little conflicts here. And
no, the game was awesome.
They kind of rushed towards the ending too in the last game.
Yeah.
I felt like the last game was like the shortest of all 3 of the games.
The Earth is under siege, and you have like they're gonna be dead in like 6 hours, and you could just go do whatever the hell you wanted at the end of the game.
All the invasion. Like, save Earth from this invasion, and then like not even 20 minutes into the game, it's like, oh, by the way, we need to go get help. We'll be back. We'll be back in like 2 months. Oh, and by the way, let's have a DLC in which you throw a party, not at Earth.
Yes, I played that.
Just so you can hang out with everyone that you collected from your previous games.
Hey, you guys remember
people that didn't die?
Yeah, you built that whole team in Mass Effect 2, and you had to choose who lived and who died. So by the end of the game, you're gonna have to make these choices to have this huge team. But fuck it, throw it all out. We're rebuilding the team in Mass Effect 3.
I know, that was so stupid. I worked so that everyone didn't die too.
Yeah. Then like the beginning of the game, like they set it up like, oh man, time sensitive. But maybe you want to go to the Citadel and help this person end this fight. Oh man.
All right, guys. Just gonna finish out with one quick thing. So I just typed in my information, my address into Verizon, and tried to figure out whether or not I actually can get FiOS in my area. And the answer is a decided no. Now I won't show the screen here because, of course, it has my address on there. But it's decidedly no.
You mean 123 Fake Street?
So I want to thank both Alan and Justin for joining me on the show today and talking about all the bunch of topics that, again, are listed down below in the description for this video. Thank you for watching, and I invite you to join us both on the show and to watch on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. We generally talk about anything from entertainment to gaming to tech, or anything that our gracious guests like Justin are interested in talking about. Please leave some comments in the video below. Let us know how we're doing. We'd love to have some comments. Alan, any last quips or last words before we close out?
I am fucking starving. Holy cow. I have not eaten since 12 o'clock, you bastards. I'm gonna go eat now. My Chipotle's been running cold, for God's sakes. I love you guys, though. Thanks, Justin, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Justin, anything to say about the show?
It was a lot of fun. Sorry, I was on my soapbox. I felt like I was on my soapbox too much. I apologize.
It's okay if we get to race
that's
soapboxes
awesome.
later.
I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on as soon as the camera goes off. You know.
Thanks for joining us, Justin. Thanks to all of our viewers who are watching live, and thanks to anyone who catches this later on afterwards. This is Jersey Hobby Hour, episode 7 from October 7th. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.